The Collective Intelligence Bureau had approximately 4,000 regulations concerning deep space habitation, and Outpost Zenith 7 violated roughly 3,972 of them. Not through any fault of ambition or poor planning, mind you, but because the station had the cosmic courtesy to orbit a dying star that radiated more hostility than a teenage poet's diary. The scientists who'd approved its construction had done so with the kind of optimistic delusion usually reserved for people who think they can fix toxic relationships, and the result was a research platform that existed in direct opposition to the concept of continued existence. The star designation, KX 7749, though everyone called it the Spite, because it seemed personally offended by the audacity of nearby life, belched radiation storms with the regularity of a grandfather clock and twice the malice. Gravitational anomalies rippled through the station's corridors like hiccups in reality itself. Temperature fluctuations could swing from freeze your thoughts solid to boil your regrets in the span of a coffee break, assuming anyone was insane enough to brew coffee in these conditions. The collective's environmental assessment had been admirably concise. Inadvisable for organic habitation. Recommend automated systems only. Probability of crew survival beyond 6 months, approaching 0 with enthusiasm. Naturally, they'd sent a crew anyway. Science waits for no one, and certainly not for something as trivial as survivability. Mission Commander Vexthol of the Kryn species stood in the command center, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the angry red glow of warning lights that had become the station's permanent mood lighting. Kryn were known throughout the galaxy for their methodical nature, their unshakable adherence to protocol, and their ability to remain calm in situations that would send other species screaming into the void. Vexthol embodied all these qualities, which made his current existential crisis all the more notable. Day 47, he recorded in his log, voice carrying the emotional range of a particularly depressed calculator. Morale remains catastrophically low. Dr. Quellin has begun talking to the wall panels. Engineer Thross has filed his 803rd formal complaint. Navigator Prill's chromatic patterns now exclusively express variations of despair. The ration packs continue to taste like compressed disappointment with notes of industrial regret. I am beginning to understand why the assessment suggested automation. Dr. Quellin, the station's Andorian biochemist, drifted past the command center at that moment, clutching a scanner and muttering calculations that seemed designed to prove mathematically why they should all just give up now. Andorians were typically cheerful beings. Their homeworld was a paradise of temperate zones and reasonable physics, which made Quellin's descent into pessimism particularly dramatic. He'd taken to calculating the probability of various disasters with the enthusiasm most people reserved for hobbies. "Commander," Quellin announced without looking up from his scanner, "I've determined there's a 63% chance the next radiation storm will cook us all from the inside out, a 28% chance the gravity fluctuation will compress us into meat cubes, and a 9% chance something we haven't even discovered yet will kill us in a novel and scientifically interesting way. Your percentages total 100, Vexthol observed. "Yes, I'm accounting for the 0% chance we survive." From somewhere in the maintenance shaft came the sound of Thross, the hexapod engineer, having what could generously be called a moment. Hexapods possessed 6 articulated limbs capable of performing complex tasks simultaneously, which meant Thross could bang on broken equipment with 4 appendages while gesturing rudely with the other 2. His complaints had evolved into an art form. "Nothing works." His voice echoed through the ventilation. "The thermal regulators are compromised. The radiation shielding is held together by hope and expired sealant, and I'm pretty sure the waste recycler is developing sentience just so it can quit. Navigator Prill floated through a bulkhead, one of the few perks of being a gas-based life form, shifting through a color spectrum that roughly translated to, "I've accepted our doom and made peace with the universe, which is apparently trying to murder us." Prill's species communicated entirely through chromatic changes, and lately his palette had been limited to various shades of existential dread. This was the crew of Outpost Zenith 7, four beings united by their profound regret at accepting this assignment and their shared conviction that the collective's recruitment officer had lied about everything except the dying star part. Then the communication console chirped with incoming personnel data, and Vexthal's day managed to get worse. A human, Quellin looked up from his disaster calculations. "They're sending us a human. An environmental specialist, apparently." Vexthal confirmed, reading the file with growing confusion. Name: Marcus Way. Specialization: Adaptive Habitat Solutions. Arrives in 3 cycles. Thros emerged from the maintenance shaft, all 6 limbs covered in synthetic lubricant and fury. A human. Those fragile little bipeds who need specific atmospheric pressure and constant temperature regulation. "They're sending one here." Prill shifted to a skeptical orange. Humans were something of a cosmic punchline in the collective. They'd only achieved interstellar capability 60 years ago, practically yesterday in galactic terms, and they hailed from a death world they'd somehow convinced themselves was pretty nice actually. Their planet actively tried to kill them through weather, geology, biology, and occasionally just random bad luck. Yet they'd not only survived but developed an inexplicable fondness for the place. Most species found them baffling, some found them endearing, the majority found them exhausting. "What," Quellin asked slowly, "is an environmental specialist supposed to do on a station where the environment is actively hostile to environmental specialization?" Vexthal had no answer. The collective worked in mysterious ways, usually because the bureaucracy was so convoluted that decisions emerged from it like ancient prophecies, inexplicable and probably ominous. 3 cycles later, Marcus Way arrived via supply shuttle with the kind of luggage situation that suggested either excellent preparation or complete insanity. Where most crew members brought personal effects in a single standardized container, the human emerged with 7 cases of varying sizes, 3 equipment pods, and what appeared to be a locked freezer unit. "Marcus Way reporting," he announced cheerfully, as if he'd just arrived at a beach resort rather than a station that was statistically likely to kill him in interesting ways. He was average height for a human, with dark hair, brown skin, and an expression that could only be described as amused by something the universe hadn't shared with the rest of the class. Vexthal performed the standard greeting protocol. "Welcome to Outpost Zenith 7. I am Commander Vexthal. I trust you've reviewed the environmental briefings." "Oh yeah," Marcus said, glancing around the command center as another radiation warning flashed. "Real hostile out here. I love it." Quellin appeared, scanner in hand, already calculating. "Statistically, you shouldn't love anything about this place. The conditions are challenging, sure." Marcus was already moving his luggage toward the crew quarters, navigating the corridor with the ease of someone who'd apparently decided not to be bothered by things like imminent death. But challenges are just problems that haven't met the right solutions yet. "Speaking of which, Commander, I'm going to need access to the waste recycling system, the unused storage bay in Section 7, and whatever equipment manifests you've got lying around." Vexthal's exoskeleton did the Kryn equivalent of a confused tilt. "The waste recycling system and the storage bay. Also, I'll be requisitioning some materials. Nothing fancy, just soil compounds, supplemental water purification, atmospheric regulators, and about 40 kilograms of seeds. The silence that followed was the kind that occurs when everyone present simultaneously questions reality. Seeds, Thros repeated flatly. You want to bring seeds to a station where plants would be flash-frozen, irradiated, and gravitationally crushed within seconds of existing. Marcus's smile suggested he knew something they didn't, which was either confidence or the first sign of space madness. Smart money was on the latter. Trust the process. Oh, and that storage bay. I'm converting it. Hope that's cool. Converting it into what? Vextal asked. You'll see. It's going to be great. It was not by any conventional measure great. Over the following weeks, Marcus Way became the station's most baffling mystery. He worked odd hours hauling equipment into the storage bay and sealing it behind locked doors. He made inexplicable requests for things like full-spectrum lighting arrays and thermal oscillation dampeners. He spent hours studying the station's environmental readings with an expression that shifted between calculation and what looked disturbingly like excitement. The crew's patience eroded faster than the station's hull shielding. He's cannibalizing our life support backups, Thros complained during one of their increasingly desperate crew meetings. He's rerouting power conduits. He's doing something with the radiation collectors that I don't understand, which means it's either brilliant or suicidal. The human has requisitioned materials that serve no logical purpose for survival, Vextal added, reviewing the inventory logs. Mineral compounds, organic substrates. He even requested microorganisms from the biological sample storage. Quellin had calculated 17 different theories, each more implausible than the last. Perhaps humans require elaborate rituals before accepting their inevitable doom. Or he's building a shrine. Or he's genuinely lost his mind, and we're just watching it happen in real time. Prill shifted to a worried purple that needed no translation. The storage bay remained locked. Marcus remained enigmatic. The station remained hostile, and everyone's nerves remained frayed. Then, on day 73, Marcus sent a message to all crew quarters. Storage Bay 7. Now, you're going to want to see this. They arrived expecting disaster. An explosion, perhaps, or evidence that the human had indeed succumbed to space madness and built something useless. What they found instead violated several laws of physics and at least one theological assumption. The storage bay had been transformed into a garden, not a theoretical garden, not a simulated garden, an actual, functioning, impossibly thriving garden with plants growing in organized rows under lighting that pulsed with carefully calibrated intensity. Leafy greens, climbing vines, root vegetables breaking through rich dark soil. The air inside was humid, breathable, and carried the scent of growing things, a smell so alien to the station that Quellin's scanner initially registered it as a contaminant. "What," Vextal said slowly, "am I looking at?" Marcus stood among the rows, harvesting tomatoes, actual tomatoes, with the casual demeanor of someone picking produce at a market rather than defying cosmic impossibility. "A garden. Figured we could use some fresh food. The ration packs are terrible. The ration packs are designed for nutritional efficiency," Vextal said automatically, because his brain hadn't caught up to his eyes yet. "Yeah, and they taste like sadness pressed into blocks." Marcus placed tomatoes in a basket. "But this is food." Thros approached the nearest planter as if it might explode, examining the equipment with all 6 limbs. "This is impossible. The radiation alone should have sterilized everything. The temperature fluctuations should have destroyed any biological processes. The gravitational anomalies should have actually helped," Marcus interrupted cheerfully. "See, Once I stopped thinking about the station's conditions as problems and started thinking about them as features, things got interesting. The radiation? I'm channeling it through conversion panels for power. The temperature swings? Perfect for creating climate zones. Some plants like it hot, some like it cold, and the fluctuations actually accelerate growth cycles if you time them right. The gravity anomalies? Great for water circulation. The whole system is basically powered by the stuff that's supposed to kill us. Quellin's scanner was having a crisis, but the biology plants can't just adapt to. These did. Well, with help, selective breeding, genetic flexibility, and a lot of trial and error back on Earth. Humans have been growing food in terrible conditions for thousands of years. Antarctica, space stations, underwater habitats, Mars colonies. You'd be amazed what you can grow when you're stubborn enough. Prill drifted closer, shifting through colors that expressed awe, confusion, and something that might have been hope. This is the most scientifically fascinating thing I've seen in my entire career, Quellin admitted, and also the most disturbing violation of established principles I've ever witnessed. Speaking of which, Marcus said, gesturing toward the exit, you should probably see the other thing. The other thing was a kitchen. Marcus had converted an auxiliary storage room into a fully functional cooking space, complete with equipment that shouldn't exist on a research station, and definitely shouldn't be producing the smells currently wafting through the corridor. Real smells. Food smells. The kind of aromas that triggered primal responses in species that had evolved beyond such basic pleasures, but apparently hadn't evolved beyond missing them desperately. I've been working on this for a couple weeks, Marcus explained, moving between heating surfaces with practiced ease. Figured out how to supplement the garden produce with creatively repurposed rations. Turns out if you break down those nutrition blocks and recombine them with actual ingredients and proper cooking techniques, you can make them almost taste like food. On the counter sat prepared meals, actual plated meals, arranged with care that suggested someone gave a damn about presentation. Vexthal stared. His species didn't technically need to eat in the conventional sense. Kryn absorbed nutrients through environmental exposure, but even he found himself drawn to the display. Try something, Marcus said simply. Quellin approached first, his pessimistic nature apparently unable to resist curiosity. He selected something that resembled a vegetable medley and took a cautious bite. His expression transformed through several stages: suspicion, surprise, disbelief, and finally something that looked dangerously close to joy. This tastes like, I haven't had real food since we arrived. I forgot food could taste like anything except regret. Thros reached out with 4 limbs simultaneously, sampling different dishes with the kind of desperation that comes from months of ration packs. All 6 appendages began trembling as his taste receptors processed actual flavors. By the ancients, this is incredible. I'm experiencing emotions I thought I'd suppressed. Prill floated through the spread, his chromatic display cycling through colors so rapidly it looked like a festival celebration. The message was clear: this was the best thing that had happened in months. Vexthal selected a simple grain dish and consumed it according to his species method. The nutrients registered. The flavors registered. Something else registered too, something his protocol-focused mind hadn't accounted for. Satisfaction. Comfort. The sense that someone had cared enough to make survival feel less like endurance and more like living. You built a garden and a kitchen, Vexthal said quietly, on a station designated uninhabitable. Yeah, Marcus served another round of portions. Here's the thing everyone seems to forget. Survival isn't just about meeting minimum requirements. It's not about calculating the lowest threshold for existence and then living there. That's not living, that's just not dying, which is technically different. He gestured around the small kitchen, at the crew members experiencing actual pleasure for the first time in months. Humans figured this out a long time ago. We came from a planet that tried really hard to kill us. Still does, honestly. We've got weather that can freeze or roast you, geology that likes to shake things up, literally, oceans that want to drown you, and don't even get me started on the wildlife. But you know what we learned? You can survive in terrible places if you're stubborn enough, but you can thrive in them if you make them home. Home, Quellin repeated, as if testing the word. Yeah, home means more than shelter. It means comfort, community, good food, things that make you want to keep going instead of just continuing because the alternative is worse. Marcus refilled plates as he talked. The collective looks at a place like this and calculates minimums. Minimum air, minimum nutrition, minimum everything. Then they wonder why crews go crazy after a few months. Thraus was on his third serving, having apparently abandoned all dignity. The efficiency reports did note psychological degradation as a primary concern. Right, because you can't just feed people compressed disappointment and expect them to maintain mental health. The body survives, sure, but everything else withers. Marcus leaned against the counter, watching the crew eat with visible satisfaction. Back home, we've got research stations in some of the most hostile places on Earth. You know what they all have in common? Kitchens. Good kitchens. Because the scientists figured out pretty quickly that food is culture, comfort and therapy all rolled into one. You can endure almost anything if you've got a good meal waiting at the end of the day. Vexthal processed this while consuming his second portion, an action he would later deny in official reports. The collective's guidelines focus entirely on physiological requirements. And that's why crews on stations like this barely make it 6 months before requesting transfers. Marcus began cleaning the cooking surfaces. People aren't just biological machines. We're complicated. We need more than nutrients and oxygen. We need reasons to care about tomorrow beyond statistically likely to survive another day. Prill shifted to a warm golden color and remained there, the chromatic equivalent of a contented sigh. Look at you all, Marcus continued. When I got here, you were going through the motions. Doing your jobs because that's what you do, but not really living. Now you're tasting actual food and remembering why existing can be nice sometimes. That's not weakness. That's human wisdom, and humanity learned it the hard way. By refusing to accept that some places were uninhabitable. Quellin said, exactly. Our ancestors looked at frozen wastelands and said, I'm going to live there, and I'm going to like it. They looked at deserts and mountains and swamps and said the same thing. Then they figured out how to make it work. Not just survive, thrive. We're really good at being stubborn in creative ways. This station was rated uninhabitable, Vexthal noted. Marcus grinned. By people who gave up too easily. Over the following months, Outpost Zenith 7 transformed in ways that confused the collective's bureaucrats and delighted everyone actually living there. Crew efficiency increased 47%. Psychological evaluations improved dramatically. Equipment malfunctions decreased as people maintained systems with actual care rather than resentful obligation. The station that should have broken its crew instead became something approaching functional. Marcus trained the others in basic cooking techniques, turning meal preparation into a social activity. Quellin discovered he enjoyed baking. Who knew Andorians had a talent for bread? Thraus developed a specialty in soups that utilized all 6 limbs in preparation. Even Vexthal participated, learning to combine flavors according to precise protocols that were nevertheless creative. The garden expanded. Marcus kept adding sections, each one exploiting different environmental quirks. A berry patch thrived in what should have been lethal radiation exposure. Herbs grew in temperature zones that fluctuated wildly. Root vegetables developed in gravity wells that made no conventional sense. Word spread through the collective. Other uninhabitable stations, places where crews barely survived through sheer determination and ration packs, started requesting human consultants. The bureaucrats sent memos about irregular environmental adaptation protocols and unapproved habitat modifications. The scientists published papers with titles like Human-Based Habitat Solutions, Why Didn't We Think of This?, and Food as Infrastructure Recalculating Survival Metrics. Thross designed new station models incorporating kitchen facilities as standard equipment. It's logical, he insisted, though everyone suspected he just wanted access to better food on future assignments. Quellin stopped calculating disaster probabilities and started calculating optimal growing conditions for various plant species. His pessimism hadn't disappeared. Andorians didn't change fundamental personality traits, but it had been redirected toward productive skepticism. Prill's chromatic range expanded to include colors the crew had never seen before, all of them variations of contentment and satisfaction. 6 months after Marcus's arrival, Vexthal filed his official report to the collective. Station performance exceeded all projections. Crew retention was unprecedented. Morale remained stable despite environmental hostility. Research output had actually increased. He wrote it all in proper protocol format, careful to document the measurable improvements without editorializing. Then he added a personal note at the end. Recommend revising uninhabitable station protocols. Human approach merits consideration. The collective's bureaucrats read the report with confusion. The data clearly showed success, but it contradicted their models. Nothing should thrive on Zenith 7. The station existed in direct opposition to comfortable living. Yet somehow, impossibly, the crew was not only surviving but actively happy. One administrator sent a query, but the environmental data clearly indicated nothing could live there. Vexthal's response was brief. The human disagreed. On outpost Zenith 7, in a garden that shouldn't exist, Marcus Way harvested vegetables while humming something that might have been an old Earth song. Outside, the Spite unleashed another radiation storm, the kind that should have sterilized everything and everyone. Warning lights flashed. Alarms chirped. The station's shields absorbed punishment that would make most engineers weep. Marcus didn't even look up. He was focused on tomatoes. In the kitchen, the crew gathered for evening meal, a tradition that had somehow become sacred despite not appearing in any official schedule. They cooked together, combining techniques from 4 different species and one stubborn human. The food was excellent. The company was better. The conversation ranged from scientific theories to terrible jokes, with multiple languages and chromatic patterns overlapping in comfortable chaos. This was Outpost Zenith 7, now still hostile, still dangerous, still rated uninhabitable by every reasonable metric. But also home, because one human had looked at impossible conditions and decided to make dinner instead of giving up. The galaxy had spent centuries calculating what couldn't be done, establishing limits and probabilities and careful boundaries. Humanity had spent significantly less time ignoring all that and doing things anyway, usually while cooking something delicious. The collective would eventually update its guidelines, incorporating human wisdom about thriving versus surviving. Other species would adopt the practices, creating homes in places previously considered unlivable. Thousands of stations would benefit from one simple truth: people work better when they're fed well and treated like they matter. But that was all future knowledge, academic and abstract. Right now, in this moment, Marcus Way smiled while harvesting tomatoes on a station that should have killed him, surrounded by crew members who'd forgotten what happiness tasted like until someone cared enough to cook them a proper meal. The universe continued its hostility. The star kept spewing radiation. The conditions remained objectively terrible, and in defiance of all logic and reason, everyone sat down to dinner and enjoyed it immensely. The command had said nothing could live there. The human had built a kitchen, fed everyone and smiled. Turned out stubbornness and good food could triumph over cosmic hostility, statistical improbability, and bureaucratic pessimism combined. Who knew? Well, humans did. They'd known for thousands of years. The rest of the galaxy was just catching up, one meal at a time,